Our story begins with Lu, a young man who did not seem special at all, yet appearances were completely deceiving. In truth, he was a professional assassin who possessed terrifying skills and exceptional intelligence. Because of his sharp instincts, he realized early on that the very organization that had raised and trained him to become a merciless killing machine was planning to dispose of him in the end, and indeed, he was assassinated. But that was not his end. Instead, it became the beginning of a completely new life after he reincarnated into another world filled with magic and legendary skills. But before we continue, we return to Lu before his death, when he was assigned a mission to assassinate the high-ranking members of the Mafia. At that moment, he prepared his massive sniper rifle and began firing with terrifying precision, causing the targets to fall one after another without the slightest mercy. He worked alongside his new partner, a young girl whose role was to identify the target's locations with incredible speed. Lug continued eliminating them without missing even a single shot, throwing the Mafia members into complete panic. As for the survivors, they attempted to hide behind cars to escape the bullets, but that was nowhere near enough to stop him. The moment his partner informed him of the hidden enemies' locations, his bullets pierced through the vehicles themselves and struck them directly. After the operation ended, Lu calmly stood up and informed her that the mission was over after they had eliminated the important figures they were ordered to kill. The girl was shocked because she believed they would wipe out every single Mafia member without exception. However, Lug responded coldly, explaining that they were merely people who carried out orders, not heroes of justice. He added that their only duty was to take lives whenever they were commanded to do so. At that moment, she curiously asked him if he could imagine a reason why the organization would order them to kill only the boss. He answered that the organization they worked for was a massive secret organization seeking complete control over the country, which meant they likely shared mutual interests with the Mafia itself. Therefore, instead of destroying it entirely, they simply replaced its leadership so it would remain under their control. Those words deeply shocked the girl because she had entered this world believing she would change it for the better. Before the two of them left, Lu noticed a drone observing them from above. Immediately, he ordered her to get into the car while realizing that his new mission had become escaping from the drone safely. Meanwhile, the drone continued chasing them, and Lug began to understand that remaining inside the vehicle would only lead to their deaths. The girl still could not understand what was happening, while he alone saw the entire picture and realized that escaping from their pursuers would never be easy. Because of that, he instructed her to prepare a handgun and tie a wire to its trigger, then set the car to continue driving forward on its own. At the perfect moment, the two of them jumped out of the car while the vehicle continued moving alone. Directly behind it, the military vehicles charged forward in a fierce pursuit. Suddenly, the handgun connected to the wire began firing automatically toward the soldiers, forcing them to retaliate immediately and blow up the car completely, without realizing that Lug and his partner were not even inside it. In reality, the two of them were hiding behind a nearby rock. After the situation calmed down slightly, the girl suggested returning to base, but Lug informed her that such a thing was impossible now because the drone was still flying through the sky and could detect heat signatures during the night, meaning it would easily discover them. That was why they needed to wait until sunrise, because the sunlight would make it difficult for the infrared cameras to distinguish the heat of their bodies from the surrounding environment. After a short while, Lug noticed that she was injured, so he helped her clean and bandage the wound. Since they would be forced to move once dawn arrived, the two of them decided to rest and sleep on the ground for a while. However, during that time, the girl continuously bombarded him with questions without stopping, like a journalist incapable of silence, giving him no opportunity to rest. Eventually, he stopped her curiosity and told her that this mission would be his final one, because he had promised himself he would retire afterward. He also revealed that he intended to begin a new life as an instructor for beginner assassins like her. That greatly angered her, so she immediately told him that she was not a beginner and that she had ranked first in her class. But Lug replied with deadly coldness, saying that her classmates were probably failures because he believed she still had an extremely long road ahead of her. He mocked her even further and claimed that he had been a far better assassin than her even when he was just a child. Then suddenly, in a single instant, he snatched her handgun and pointed it directly at her head, mocking how easily he had taken the weapon from her hands and considering that alone enough proof that she was a terrible assassin. He scolded her even more for trusting him and told her that he could end her miserable life with a single pull of the trigger. The girl froze in place, unable to even move. After several moments, Lug realized that she still had much to learn, so he lowered the handgun and returned it to her before deciding to sleep. But on the other side, the girl decided to return the prank, so she pointed the handgun directly at him. Even so, Lug remained completely calm and confident that she would never fire. When she tried to understand the reason behind his confidence, he simply informed her that he had returned the handgun without any bullets inside it. After that, he pulled the bullets out of his pocket and dropped them onto the ground while mocking her, confidently stating that he was not an idiot like her. Then he told her that the bullets had fallen onto the ground exactly like the level of her intelligence. Those words made her feel deeply disappointed in herself. On the following day, the two of them returned to the base and contacted the organization. There, they were congratulated on the success of the mission, and afterward they asked Lug whether his partner was still alive. When he answered that she was fine, they informed him that there was a drawer beneath the desk containing everything he needed to leave the country. The moment he opened the drawer, he found 2 forged passports along with 2 tickets bound for Japan. After that, they arrived at the airport and boarded the airplane. For the first time in a very long while, Lou began to feel a sense of relief as he thought about his new future as an instructor far away from the world of assassinations and killing. But suddenly, the airplane was struck by an extremely violent turbulence, causing all the passengers to panic. Everyone began screaming and gathering together in terror, and one of the passengers quickly pulled out his phone only to discover a shocking piece of news. The airplane had been hijacked. On the other side, the girl looked at Lug nervously and asked him what was happening, especially since there were no visible hijackers anywhere. However, Lug understood the truth immediately and calmly informed her that this was not a hijacking at all, but rather an assassination attempt orchestrated by his own organization. They had decided to eliminate him permanently because that had been the only condition required to activate his retirement plan. Those words struck her like lightning, and she immediately began whispering final prayers while trembling in fear. As for Lug, he instantly rushed toward the cockpit. One of the flight attendants foolishly attempted to stop him, but he shoved her aside without hesitation. The moment he entered the cockpit, he discovered that both pilots were already dead. At that instant, he immediately took their place and attempted to regain control of the airplane in order to save whoever remained alive on board. During that moment, he noticed a fighter jet flying beside them, and it was obvious that it had come to end the entire flight completely. Before the situation could worsen further, Lug felt that his life had finally reached a dead end. He had experienced the bitterness of true betrayal after the organization he had served his entire life abandoned him so easily. Then, suddenly, he opened his eyes, only to find himself inside a strange world that resembled the realm of souls. Standing directly before him was an unbelievably beautiful ruler, yet her irritating expression alone was enough to annoy him from the very first moment. She began mocking him, asking how the greatest assassin on earth could be deceived and betrayed so easily by his own organization. Lug immediately asked her where he was and why he had been brought to this place. At that moment, she informed him that she would grant him 2 choices. The first option was to return to Earth and be reborn as a newborn baby, without any memories of his previous life. The second option was to reincarnate into a parallel world filled with magic and sorcery while retaining all his memories and experience. But in exchange for carrying out a specific mission, at that moment, Lou remembered the saying he had always believed in. If something appears too perfect, then there is usually a disaster hidden behind it. Because of that, he directly asked her about the person she wanted him to assassinate. She answered that she wanted him to reincarnate into that new world and then assassinate the hero who had been born there. While they were speaking, she casually served him tea as though she were playing inside a dollhouse, while Luke himself still could not fully comprehend the concept of reincarnation. However, the ruler explained to him that reincarnation was far more common than humans imagined, and that important souls were often granted the opportunity to reincarnate once again, although most of them lost their previous memories. At that moment, Lu finally made his decision. He had grown completely tired of his life on Earth and preferred to begin a new life within that world, on the condition that he would retain all his memories and skills. Throughout his entire life, he had believed himself to be nothing more than a tool without emotions, yet the moment of his death made him experience oppression and betrayal for the very first time. He realized then that he had merely been used and discarded, and that he had never lived for himself even once. As for the ruler, she did not care about the details of his new life. She clearly informed him that the only thing that mattered was that he kill the hero the moment he reached the age of 18. Afterward, she placed her hand upon his head and transferred all the information related to the new world into him: the language, the culture, the system of life, and everything he would need in order to avoid getting lost or attracting suspicion. And thus, his new journey within the world of magic began, but with an assassination mission far more dangerous than any mission he had ever faced before. After fully understanding the laws of the new world, Lu decided to ask about something far more complicated in his eyes: the minds of women. Because of that, he asked the ruler about the true reason behind her desire to kill the hero. She answered that the hero would indeed succeed in defeating the Demon King, but afterward his power would corrupt him, transforming him into a tyrant who would dominate and destroy the entire world. Lug listened to the story with interest before commenting that it sounded like the plot of an anime worthy of watching. Afterward, he asked her whether he could kill the hero at any time, but she refused immediately and informed him that the hero was the only one capable of defeating the Demon King, which meant he had to remain alive until he completed that mission first. Only after that would Lug be free to act however he wished. At that moment, Lu fully understood what was required of him and accepted the mission. Afterward, the ruler showed him several cards containing different abilities, and he began choosing from them with extreme caution across multiple categories. In the end, he obtained a special ability that allowed him to freely use the 4 magical elements without restriction. After finishing his selections, the ruler wished him good luck before finally sending him to the new world. And there, he was born as a child within a noble family. That family was known among the people as a long bloodline of royal surgeons. But the truth that nobody knew was that in secret, they were a guild of professional assassins possessing the highest levels of training and expertise. For Lu, that place was perfect for training as an assassin without needing to hide, and that alone made him extremely happy. The years passed quickly, and Lu became a small child completely immersed in training from the very moment he learned how to walk. After that, he decided to enter the forest to personally test his skills and hunt a rabbit in the open. He began tracking the footprints, then dashed through the trees at incredible speed before hanging himself from one of the branches and firing a precise shot that landed directly in the rabbit's eye, ending its life instantly. Afterward, he returned home carrying the rabbit, and his mother warmly welcomed him and offered to cook it for him. However, because of her disastrous cooking skills, Lug insisted on preparing the meal himself. He believed that reaching true strength required perfect nutrition, and since that world possessed no kind of protein powder, he used whatever was available to him. He mixed herbs and spices with the meat and prepared an almost perfectly balanced meal before eating it together with his family. The moment the meal ended, his father, who was as cold as ice, stood up and ordered him to head down to the basement, their usual training area. Lug immediately obeyed, and his father ordered him to remove all his clothes completely, which he did without hesitation. Afterward, his father began making him perform strange movements, resembling Jackie Chan combat stances, while carefully examining his body and confirming that his growth was progressing perfectly and that his physical condition far surpassed children of his age. Once the examination ended, his father informed him that he was finally ready for the eye operation. That operation was a family secret known by no one else. The family possessed a special surgical technique that made their eyes extraordinary, and it was usually performed from father to son at an older age. However, because of Lu's overwhelming abilities, his father decided that the time had come. On the following day, Lug's eyes were covered with bandages while his mother took care of him as though he were still a tiny child, feeding him and treating him with excessive affection. When he felt that the situation had become overly pampering, he immediately escaped to his father. At that moment, his father removed the bandages from his eyes. The instant he opened them, Lug saw the scenery before him with terrifying clarity. He could see every possession within the family estate in incredible detail, and when he focused further, he discovered that he could clearly see extremely distant places without difficulty, and it did not stop there. He also became capable of seeing in darkness itself, an ability he considered an absolute treasure for a professional assassin like himself. He then turned to thank his father, but suddenly noticed something even stranger. He had become capable of clearly seeing the amount of mana flowing inside his father. At that moment, his father informed him that he had prepared a private instructor who would begin teaching him magic starting tomorrow. Lug felt genuine excitement because he had been waiting for that moment ever since arriving in this world. On the following day, his mother forced him to wear a princess dress in order to welcome the new instructor. After a short while, a carriage arrived in front of the mansion, and from it stepped down a small, silver-haired girl who introduced herself as Dia. She approached Lug, who looked incredibly ridiculous in that dress, and commented that he looked far too young to learn magic. But Lug replied that she herself was barely older than him. Those words irritated her, so she immediately decided to demonstrate her power and cast an explosion spell before him, leaving him astonished. Afterward, she informed him that despite her youthful appearance, she was one of the 4 strongest mages in the kingdom, and that she would train him day and night until he became at least the 5th strongest mage in the kingdom. And from that moment onward, Lug's true magic training finally began. On the next day, his official training started. The two of them stood inside the garden and introduced themselves properly, but Dia asked him not to be overly formal since she was only 3 years older than him. However, Lug insisted on treating her as his teacher, emphasizing that he should respect her completely. At that moment, she pulled out a beautiful crystal sphere known as a var stone, and explained that the stone measured the natural amount of mana within a person. The greater the mana quantity became, the more complex and destructive magic the user could wield. Afterward, she asked him to pour all the mana he possessed into the stone. Lug began channeling mana gradually, then continued, then increased it more and more. Dia became completely shocked by the terrifying amount of mana he possessed, while the stone itself began violently shaking and losing stability because it could no longer withstand that energy. Suddenly, Dia screamed at him in fear and ordered him to throw the stone immediately. At that moment, Lug reinforced his body and hurled the stone high into the sky. In the very next instant, it exploded in a massive blast that shook the entire area. That sound caused his father and mother to rush outside in order to discover what had happened. As for Dia, she was utterly terrified and believed they would become extremely angry, so she immediately accepted responsibility and confessed that the mistake was hers because she had not realized the monstrous amount of mana Lug possessed. But the surprising part was that his parents were not angry at all. Instead, they felt overwhelming happiness because of their son's power. They even thanked Dia because she had allowed them to realize just how extraordinary Lu truly was before leaving the two of them to continue training. As for Lu, his thoughts became fixated on the Varstone itself because he realized that its explosion could someday become the perfect weapon against the hero. Because of that, he asked Dia about those stones and how he could obtain them. She answered that those stones were not sold normally and were considered extremely rare jewels and national treasures within her kingdom, while the trade surrounding them was heavily controlled. During the night, Dia sneaked into his room and slept beside him, telling him that she viewed him as a little brother. Fortunately, she did not get stuck under the bed this time. On the following day, the two of them went to the bank of a river. There, Dia handed him another var stone, but this time she asked him to pour only a very small amount of mana into it because she wanted to determine which magical elements he possessed. She first began with the fire element and became happy when she discovered that he had compatibility with it. Afterward, she decided to test the water element as well, explaining that possessing both fire and water elements together was an extremely rare trait. Then the test began. During that moment, Dia informed him that having 2 magical elements within a single person was considered incredibly rare, and that she herself was one of the few people blessed with that ability. But the surprise that caused her to freeze in place was that Lug truly possessed both the fire and water elements together. Dia became extremely happy because she was now capable of teaching him every spell she knew. As for Lug, he curiously asked her whether it was possible for someone to possess a third element. Dia smiled confidently and informed him that such a thing was impossible. Never in the history of that world had a single person possessed 3 magical elements at the same time. But the true shock left Dia completely speechless when she discovered that Lug possessed the wind element as well. Out of pure curiosity, she decided to complete the test one final time, only to discover that this madman possessed all 4 elements entirely, something that had never once happened in history. She took a deep breath while trying to process the situation, realizing that this child was definitely not an ordinary person. After that, she sat beside him and began trying to awaken his innate magic. Suddenly, Lug started using simple spells and managed to perform various things with them. That moment, Dia explained to him that constantly using magic would allow him to learn far more complicated spells over time. However, Lug struggled to imagine the shape of the spells and the way they were constructed, so Dia decided to show him one of the simplest earth element spells, the copper creation spell. She recited the spell with ease, and immediately a block of copper appeared before them. Lug attempted to imitate her, but his pronunciation was not perfect because he originally did not belong to that world. Because of that, a distorted block of copper appeared before him as though it were suffering from a severe illness. That night, he sat down recording everything he had learned, and as usual, Dia entered the room to sleep beside him. On the following day, after many attempts, he finally succeeded in creating a perfectly normal piece of copper. Dia felt extremely happy because of the speed of his progress. At that moment, he asked her whether she could write other spells for him to test, so she wrote down the iron spell for him. Lug recited the spell, and instantly a block of iron appeared before him. At that moment, he began noticing something incredibly important. The spells were extremely similar to one another, and the differences between them were very minor. Through his analysis, he concluded that the true difference between the metals within the spell was the atomic weight of each metal. He attempted to explain the idea to Dia, but she could barely comprehend what he was saying. Because of that, he decided to simplify the matter. He took the iron spell, then modified the number related to the atomic weight and changed it to correspond to gold. Afterward, he asked Dia to recite the spell, but she instantly collapsed onto the ground while suffering from a horrifying headache. At that moment, he understood that this spell was not something just anyone could use. Therefore, he grabbed the paper himself, wrote down the spell, and recited it personally. Suddenly, a shining block of gold appeared before him. Dia froze from overwhelming shock. Afterward, Lug modified several details within the formula using his skills and analysis, and suddenly, Dia herself became capable of creating gold. The two of them felt overwhelming happiness because of that revolutionary discovery. After many long days of experimentation, Lu became capable of creating complex materials using those metals. After that, the two of them went to the riverbank, and there Lu used his magic to create an entire rifle before using another spell to fire magical bullets from it. Dia successfully managed to imitate him, which made Lu extremely happy because he saw that weapon as a possible method that could help him against the hero in the future. Even so, he still felt that the rifle's destructive power was nowhere near enough to confront someone with such overwhelming strength. Because of that, he decided to create an enormous cannon, a gigantic cannon greater than any weapon ever created within that region before, and merely standing before it was enough to fill anyone with tension because of its terrifying size and overwhelming presence. Before firing it, Lu asked Dia to tightly cover her ears and move farther away. Afterward, he aimed the cannon toward the island across from them and fired. In the next instant, the entire area violently shook with terrifying force, to the point that the ground itself trembled beneath their feet, while the air split apart from the intensity of the explosion. The projectile launched forward, and the island on the opposite side was transformed into complete destruction, while rocks and ash scattered in every direction. Lug was deeply impressed by the level of destructive power he had achieved, and felt that weapon was capable of changing the balance of any battle. But when he looked toward the cannon, he discovered that the barrel itself had failed to withstand the overwhelming pressure and had shattered completely. At that moment, he realized that he needed a far stronger metal, one capable of enduring that level of power without collapsing. Afterward, he asked Dia whether she wished to try the cannon herself, but she immediately refused, insisting that her magical rifle was more than enough for her and that she had no intention of dying because of such a lunatic weapon. That night, while the two of them were sleeping beside one another, Dia seemed deeply emotional because it was her final day as Lug's teacher, and tomorrow she would return to her kingdom and leave that place behind forever. As for Lug, because of his cold nature, he refused to directly show his emotions. Because of that, instead of expressing himself through words, he used his magic and created a dagger from an extremely durable metal. That dagger was made from a rare metal that nobody in that world had ever seen before, and it shined in a strange way as though it had been created from a material that did not belong to that world at all. Lug showed it to her while explaining how sharp it was, then informed her that it was his farewell gift to her. Dia felt extremely happy because of the dagger and continued staring at it with obvious admiration. In return, she removed her own necklace, which contained a beautiful var stone, then handed it to him, and asked him to promise that if she ever missed him one day, he would come to see her no matter how great the distance between them was. On the following day, she climbed into her carriage and left the place after thanking the family for their hospitality and for the time she had spent with them, then promised that she would someday return to see them again. After her departure, Lug's father looked at him with a different expression than usual and informed him that he could sense an overwhelming amount of mana flowing from within him, far greater than what should exist inside a child his age. Then he announced that Lug was finally ready for the first true step on the path toward becoming a professional assassin. That night, he took him to a massive prison filled with criminals sentenced to death. The place itself was horrifyingly gloomy, overflowing with screams of pain and suffering in a way that would terrify anyone the moment they entered it. That prison was used by the family for testing new medicines and training assassination techniques. At that moment, Lu asked his father why he had raised him while allowing him to keep human emotions, explaining that such emotions could weaken him whenever he was forced to kill others and might cause him to hesitate during critical moments. But his father calmly answered that he did not want him to become nothing more than a tool for killing or a machine without feelings. Instead, he wanted him to live a normal life outside that profession and become a human capable of separating his ordinary life from his duties as an assassin rather than being a mere weapon used to carry out orders. Afterward, the two of them arrived at one of the prison cells. There, he showed him a 19-year-old girl tied to a chair with her mouth gagged. The moment the gag was removed, she immediately began crying and begging them to release her. His father explained that the girl had broken into the home of an elderly couple in order to steal from them. However, when the owners of the house returned, chaos erupted and ultimately led to both of their deaths. The girl began crying while insisting that she had only been searching for food and that everything that happened was the result of fear and that she had never intended to kill anyone. She continued begging desperately while clinging to any hope of surviving. But Lug decided to end the matter quickly and without hesitation, immediately stopping her from speaking. The girl froze in shock before starting to scream and cry for help while looking toward his father because he had previously told her that begging might grant her a chance to survive. But Lug understood very well that mercy had no place in moments like those, and that hesitation was capable of destroying any professional assassin. Because of that, he felt no sympathy toward her. And without any hesitation, he ended the matter completely. 2 years passed after that, and Lug became 10 years old. Throughout those 2 years, his skills developed in a terrifying manner, whether in magic, assassination, or mana control. One day, he went to the market together with his family. Everyone was busy selling crops before winter arrived, while the place itself overflowed with the noise of merchants and bargaining voices as people tried to sell their goods before the cold season began. The men spoke about trade and prices while his mother exchanged conversations with the women of the marketplace as though the day were completely ordinary. As for Lug, he was focused on something entirely different. He was trying to sense anyone who possessed unusual mana, but he discovered that the task was harder than searching for a needle inside a mountain of hay, because most people possessed extremely weak energy, and only 8 years remained before the time came to assassinate the hero, which was why he was convinced that he needed someone capable of helping him and carrying out his plans alongside him. Because of that, he began searching for anyone possessing even the slightest amount of mana so he could recruit them and make them one of his followers. On the following day, he headed into the forest for his usual hunting trip. At first, the forest was strangely quiet, but suddenly he heard a distant howl that instantly sharpened his focus. He lowered himself toward the ground and listened carefully before sensing that a pack of wolves was chasing prey at tremendous speed. Because of that, he decided to follow the sound, hoping he might benefit from the situation or steal the prey for himself. When he finally arrived, he found a group of wolves surrounding a small girl who looked exhausted and weak, and it was obvious that she had been running away for a very long time. Suddenly, one of the wolves leaped toward her, but Lug's arrow was faster. The arrow shot forward and pierced directly through the wolf before it could even touch her. Afterward, Lug stood before the girl to protect her, then calmly began counting the wolves with his eyes and decided to treat eliminating them as practical training for his new abilities. Lug handed the girl his equipment so she could move a little farther away from the danger, then calmly drew his knife as though he were about to begin an ordinary training session rather than a life-or-death battle. One of the wolves charged toward him at high speed, but Lug moved with astonishing agility before delivering a precise strike that instantly brought the wolf down. On the other side, another wolf attempted to approach the girl, yet Lug rushed forward and pushed it away before it could even touch her. Afterward, 2 wolves attacked him together and violently bit down on his arms with their fangs, but Lug was wearing metal guards beneath his clothes. He forcefully twisted his body and slammed both wolves into the ground until they lost the ability to move. As for the final wolf, it attempted to attack from behind, but Lug delivered a powerful strike that completely ended the battle, allowing silence to dominate the forest once more. After eliminating all of them, he returned to the girl and asked what she was doing alone inside such a dangerous forest. The moment she looked at him, the girl became terrified and stepped back slightly while insisting that she did not want to harm anyone and that she was merely a lost girl. Afterward, she began explaining her story to him, revealing that her family had been extremely poor and that there had never been enough food for everyone, which was why they decided to abandon her and leave her to her fate. She added that she had heard from a kind person that the Tuatha region, the territory ruled by Lug's family, was considered one of the wealthiest regions and that its people lived far better lives. Because of that, she decided to cross the forest no matter how dangerous it was until she could finally reach it. Out of calculated sympathy, Lu removed his coat and gave it to her so she could protect herself from the cold, then lit a small fire and began preparing some porridge. The girl stared at the food as though she could not believe that someone was actually cooking for her at all. Once he finished, he handed her a bowl and asked her to eat slowly, because eating too quickly after severe starvation could make her vomit from exhaustion. At that moment, the girl introduced herself as Tart, then began eating the warm food with obvious gratitude while glancing at him every now and then as though she feared that Dream would suddenly disappear. After she calmed down slightly and color returned to her face, Lu gradually began revealing his plan to her. He told her the truth about himself and explained that he was the son of the Lord of the Tuatha region. The moment she heard the name, her eyes clearly sparkled, and she immediately told him that this must certainly be the destined encounter the ruler had spoken to her about before, and that she had always been certain she would someday meet a person who would completely change her life. At that moment, Luke began believing that the ruler might have been paving the way for him from the very beginning. From the instant he saw Tart, he realized that she perfectly suited the role he needed, especially because she possessed tremendous endurance and a strong will despite her young age and miserable circumstances. Because of that, he offered to take her with him to the mansion, not out of bad intentions, but to provide her with a home, food, safety, and a completely new life where she could start over from nothing. However, in exchange, he placed one extremely clear condition: that she obey all of his orders, even if they involved harsh training or dangerous missions. After saying that, he gave her complete freedom to choose without applying any pressure. As for Tart, she saw the offer as an opportunity that would never come again. Because of that, she accepted immediately without hesitation, then told him that nobody had ever needed her before, and that he was the first person to openly acknowledge that she was important and possessed real value. 2 years passed after that. One day, Lug woke up to Tart, who had grown into an incredibly beautiful young woman, while her personality had also become far calmer and stronger compared to the past. Her hard work in both training and daily tasks caused Lug's parents to care deeply for her and consider her a member of the family. However, on the very first night he brought her into the house, his father established 2 clear conditions. The first was that he would personally oversee her training, and the second was that if she ever betrayed them one day, he himself would throw her out without the slightest hesitation. Remembering that, Lug summoned Tardy for routine training inside the basement, the same examination his father used to perform on him in the past. He began inspecting her physical condition and confirming that her physical strength had truly improved and that her speed and reflexes had become far greater. After declaring that he was satisfied with her progress and turning to leave, she suddenly attempted to attack him from behind using a knife, but Lug effortlessly subdued her as though he had expected that movement from the very beginning. During that moment, it became clear that Tart possessed exceptional talent in using bladed weapons, especially knives, while her speed with them was extremely impressive. And it did not stop there. She also possessed extremely high skill with the spear. However, the problem was that an ordinary spear was difficult to conceal, and its usefulness in assassinations was limited because of its obvious size and excessive length. That night, Lu went downstairs and found her training alone in front of a practice dummy. Though she was struggling to control the knife while moving at high speed, she apologized because she had trained without his permission, explaining that she simply wanted to improve further and avoid becoming a burden to him. At that moment, Lu pulled out a special collapsible spear for her, one that could easily be hidden and transformed into a compact size suitable for covert missions. Tart felt overwhelming happiness, as though she had obtained a true treasure. She immediately tested it on the training dummy and began delivering rapid and precise strikes until she completely destroyed the dummy with flawless movements. Afterward, she thanked him enthusiastically while smiling from the bottom of her heart for the very first time. After a long day filled with training and exhaustion, the two of them fell asleep. On the following day, Lu went to the market. The moment he entered, the people immediately began calling out to him with overwhelming enthusiasm. The people of the region loved him so much that everyone wanted to give him something, even if it was small. One farmer handed him some apples, an elderly woman insisted on giving him fresh bread, while others continued placing vegetables and fruits into his cart until it became completely full. Lug attempted to refuse at first, but the people of the region viewed him as someone who helped and protected them, which was why their love for him was completely genuine. When he returned home, he placed all the supplies aside and headed directly toward his small laboratory. There, he began carefully examining his stockpile of var stones with intense concentration. After long experiments, he finally succeeded in discovering a method to create them himself, despite Dia completely refusing to reveal the secret behind charging them with mana. He spent hours experimenting and making adjustments until he finally succeeded. Afterward, he placed the stones into a special bag while intending to someday use them as bombs against the hero if necessary. Suddenly, his father summoned him. Lug immediately headed down to the training room. There, his father asked him about Tart's current level. Lug answered that he had trained her until she became close in strength to the extended members of the family and that her abilities had developed enormously during the past 2 years. Then his father asked whether he truly trusted her because he could still see the possibility that she might be a spy planted among them. But Lu calmly answered that he had observed her for years and studied all her actions and movements, and that he was completely certain she was not a spy. He even confirmed that if he had suspected for even a single moment that she posed any danger, he would have eliminated her long ago. His father nodded, confirming that he also believed Tart was sincere and that perhaps all of this truly had been part of the ruler's arrangement from the very beginning. After that, he remained silent for a moment before announcing that Lug had become strong and mature enough to undergo the final test in order to officially become an assassin within the family. Then he asked him whether he was ready. Lug answered confidently and without the slightest hesitation that he was prepared for anything. At that moment, his father informed him that the first test would be a one-on-one battle against him personally. The instant those words were spoken, the atmosphere became completely tense. Lug equipped all of his gear before leaving together with his father toward the forest. The two of them entered the dense woods in preparation for the true examination, while Lug understood that this moment would determine his entire future and whether he truly deserved the position he had reached or not. Lug entered the battle fully confident that he possessed the advantage. His experience as a professional assassin from his previous life, combined with his current training as the son of the Tuatha family, had turned him into a fighter far beyond the level of any child his age. He quickly climbed a tree to observe the area from above, but his father suddenly assaulted him with a rapid volley of arrows that forced him to dodge at the final moment with great difficulty. Lug immediately leaped away from his position, only to find himself directly in front of a bolt fired from a crossbow. He barely avoided it, then immediately counterattacked using his knife. But his father effortlessly blocked the strike as though he had already predicted all of his movements beforehand. During that exchange, the fight shifted into close combat. His father began delivering precise and lethal blows, while Lu continued dodging and attempting to counter with a powerful kick. But suddenly, his father grabbed his leg and delivered a violent strike that damaged the bone itself. Any ordinary person would have collapsed instantly after a hit like that. But Lu quickly retreated deep into the undergrowth before using a high-level healing spell to restore his leg within moments. The pain gradually disappeared, and he returned his focus to the battle as though what had happened had not been enough to stop him. Afterward, he rapidly dashed beneath the hill and successfully avoided a carefully prepared trap. Then he returned to clash with his father once again. But this time, he began reading his movements far better and became capable of predicting his attacks moments before they happened. Despite receiving an injury to his shoulder during the fight, he finally managed to exploit a small opening before placing his blade directly against his father's neck. And thus, the battle ended, and he passed the test. Afterward, the two of them returned home while Tart calmly prepared tea as though a terrifying battle had not taken place only moments earlier. His father began treating his wounds before informing him that he had taught him everything he possibly could, and that the time had finally come to begin true practical application outside the limits of training. For his very first mission, his father took him to carry out an assassination against a corrupt noble who abused his position to harm girls and oppress the weak. The operation succeeded flawlessly, without a single mistake, and afterward, the two of them escaped the area without leaving behind even the slightest trace. During other nights, they carried out multiple operations in ways that made them appear like natural accidents or sudden illnesses, so nobody would connect what was happening to the Tuatha family. While returning from treating one of the sick nobles as part of their professional cover, his father informed him of the next plan. Lug would be sent to another city under a false identity as the illegitimate son of a famous merchant, and there he would spend 2 entire years building a reputation as a clever and talented merchant capable of easily entering noble society. The reason behind that was that nobles often allowed important merchants into their mansions without strict security inspections, making that cover absolutely perfect for future assassination missions. Lug immediately agreed without any hesitation. Afterward, a massive celebration was held with the attendance of the extended family members, and there his father announced before everyone that Lug had become the youngest person to pass the final test in the entire history of the family. That announcement caused tremendous shock among those present, but the true shock came when his father declared that Lug would become the next head of the family after his death. Some members of the family became extremely displeased with the decision to the point that one of his cousins angrily threw a glass of juice at Lug. But Lug effortlessly caught the glass in mid-air without spilling even a single drop. Afterward, he calmly looked at him before challenging him to a duel in front of everyone. The young man immediately accepted the challenge, but in the blink of an eye, Lu appeared behind him with a knife pressed against his neck, causing the duel to end before it had even truly begun. Complete silence filled the area after what had happened, and everyone began realizing the true difference between Lug and the rest of the family members. After that, Lug offered the young man the chance to become his subordinate before gifting him a sword forged from the rare metal titanium. In the end, he accepted the offer, while trembling in overwhelming fear of Lug's power. On the following day, Lug and Tart headed toward the new city. There, Lug began using a new identity under the name Illig. He dyed his silver hair black, wore glasses, and completely changed the way he spoke and behaved to the point that even people who had known him before would struggle to recognize him. He had become an entirely different person. The city was considered one of the richest regions in the kingdom because of trade. The streets were overflowing with merchants arriving from every direction, while wagons loaded with goods never stopped moving for even a moment. Amid that commercial chaos, Lug began hearing rumors about a suspicious orphanage that exploited girls and secretly sold them to nobles and wealthy men. At first, he had no intention of interfering because he was completely focused on his primary mission. But when he learned that there was a commoner girl capable of using mana, he decided to investigate personally because anyone possessing such talent could become useful to him in the future. The moment he entered the orphanage, he immediately noticed the gloomy atmosphere dominating the place, while signs of fear and exhaustion were clearly visible on the girls' faces. There, he saw a beautiful blue-haired girl holding a sharp object, and she was on the verge of harming herself after convincing herself that disfiguring her own face was the only way to escape exploitation and being sold away. But before she could do anything, Lu calmly grabbed her hand and took the object away from her. Then he looked directly at her and told her that she looked beautiful when she smiled, and that she did not need to hurt herself in order to escape from those people. Those simple words caused her to freeze in place because she had not heard kindness like that in an extremely long time. Afterward, Lug met the owner of the orphanage, a greedy man whose gaze alone was enough to reveal that he viewed the girls as merchandise rather than human beings. Lug asked to purchase the girl, and there he learned that her name was Maha. The man informed him that Maha was extremely special, which was why her price would be 3 times higher than normal. He expected Lug to either negotiate or back away from the purchase, but money was no longer a problem for Lug because he was no longer merely a professional assassin. He had become a clever merchant, quietly building a new network of influence in preparation for an even more dangerous fate awaiting him in the future. Because of that, he paid the full amount without any negotiation whatsoever, which deeply shocked the orphanage owner. Afterward, the man informed him that he needed 3 days to prepare Maha and asked him to return later to take her. As for Maha, she remained standing there silently and fearfully because she knew that any objection from her could bring harm upon herself and the other girls. Before leaving, Luke coldly looked toward the man and clearly informed him that Maha had become part of his family and that any attempt to harm her would be a mistake that would not pass easily. Those words caused the man to become tense for a moment. But deep inside he never intended to obey in the first place. Driven by greed, he decided to exploit Maha one final time and earn extra money from one of the nobles. That same night, she was forcibly prepared and transported by carriage toward a massive mansion far away from the city. Throughout the journey, Maha kept remembering the way Luke had spoken to her and how gently he had stopped her from hurting herself. For the first time in a very long while, she felt that someone had seen her as a real human being rather than mere merchandise. In a moment of desperation, she decided to escape. She jumped from the carriage and began running toward the forest with all her strength. But one of the guards, who possessed the ability to use mana, quickly chased after her and managed to grab her from behind before she could get very far. Before the situation could worsen further, the guard suddenly collapsed onto the ground after receiving a powerful blow. Lug had arrived. His sudden appearance shocked the orphanage owner, causing him to nervously ask why he had returned before the agreed time. But Lu coldly answered that he had realized the truth about his filthy nature from the very first moment he saw him and had been completely certain that he would attempt something behind his back. The man immediately became furious and ordered the other guard to attack. But Lug effortlessly avoided the strike and brought him down within a single moment. Afterward, the orphanage owner himself attempted to attack from behind in a hysterical manner, but suddenly he felt something cold touching his neck. It was Lug's knife. At that moment, Lu calmly asked Maha what had truly happened. She began speaking while trembling in fear. She told him that she had been living together with the other girls in the slums, where they worked as tourist guides and earned small amounts of money, but it had been enough to grant them a relatively stable life. However, one day, the orphanage men attacked the area and kidnapped them by force. Because Maha was the only one capable of using mana, she attempted to defend the others. But in the end, she was defeated because of the overwhelming difference in numbers and experience. Afterward, they were forced to live together inside a single cramped room, while the food given to them was barely enough to keep them alive. As time passed, the girls began being sold to nobles one after another, and every time a girl disappeared, she never returned again. One of the girls, driven by complete despair, attempted to disfigure her own face so she would not be sold away, and that scene remained deeply engraved inside Maha's mind the entire time. After Lug listened to the entire story, he decided that he would not allow the matter to pass so easily. In order to obtain evidence capable of condemning the nobles involved, Tart disguised herself as one of the girls and quietly infiltrated the network. But Tart gradually succeeded in earning their trust, and at the exact moment one of the nobles attempted to exploit her inside the mansion, he was captured red-handed with complete evidence against him. With his downfall, the entire corruption network began collapsing one piece after another. On the other side, Lug returned to the orphanage, where he used healing magic to restore the disfigured girl's face before taking Maha with him to give her a new beginning. Several months passed after that, and Lug managed to prove himself as a talented merchant under the identity of Illig, while also achieving tremendous success for the merchant family he was living with. One day, Lord Baylor informed him that he had completed all the legal procedures and that Maha had officially become his adopted younger sister. That arrangement was perfect for Lug because it allowed him to work alongside her without raising any suspicion. Later, Lord Baylor took him to a private room and showed him the blueprint for a massive store located at a strategic position inside the commercial city. That store was not merely an ordinary project, but rather a new front for building enormous economic influence and forming connections with nobles, in addition to serving as the perfect cover for far more secretive movements in the future. Lug smiled calmly because he realized that his journey was no longer simply training to become an assassin, but had evolved into the process of building an entire empire within the shadows. After that, Lord Baylor offered him a failing liquor shop located at one of the city's major intersections and informed him that he was the only person capable of bringing it back to life. Lug hesitated briefly before agreeing. Back at home, he sat together with Tart and Maha during dinner and explained his plan to them. He informed them that the store needed to generate massive profits in order to survive, and that they would need to sell products capable of attracting noblewomen because the true path into noble mansions often passed through them. Then he revealed that he intended to sell cosmetics and luxurious sweets, targeting the market of aristocratic ladies. At that moment, Maha asked him how he intended to enter the cosmetics market, despite it already being filled with competitors. But Lug merely gave a calm smile and informed her that he possessed a plan he would reveal soon. On the following day, he presented the idea to Lord Baylor and his wife, who treated him with obvious coldness because she believed him to be her husband's illegitimate son. She also kept her face hidden behind a mask at all times. Lug began explaining his idea, clarifying that he had no intention of competing against the cosmetics currently available on the market, but instead intended to create a product that would complement them. He explained that makeup exhausted the skin and caused dryness and cracks after removal, while his new product would function as a skin moisturizer. Lord Baylor's wife tested a small amount on her hand and was immediately shocked by how soft her skin became. Afterward, she removed the mask covering her face in order to test it directly, revealing that she had been hiding a severe skin condition that had destroyed her self-confidence for a very long time. After using the moisturizer, she felt an enormous difference almost immediately. To make the results even clearer, Lug asked her to apply makeup directly over the moisturizer. At that moment, the makeup spread perfectly smoothly, without any dryness or cracking whatsoever. She then stared at him sharply and declared that she hated him, but loved this product. As for Lord Baylor, after seeing the happiness on his wife's face, he asked her whether she wished to share it with her friends. Then he turned toward Lug and asked about his current production capacity. Lug answered that he was capable of producing around 200 bottles per week because he was currently the only person who knew the manufacturing method. Lord Baylor suggested hiring workers in order to increase production, but Lug temporarily refused. He understood very well that expanding the team at that stage could lead to the formula leaking, especially with competing companies that might attempt to buy the workers' loyalty. Afterward, Lord Baylor asked him how much time he would need before beginning large-scale production. Lug answered that by the end of the month, he would be capable of preparing a completely secure production system. However, he added one important condition. That moisturizer required a special and extremely pure ingredient, and obtaining it from the market was incredibly difficult. Because of that, they needed to secure a stable source for that ingredient before beginning mass production. And from there, the next stage of his plan began. The matter was no longer simply about creating a successful product, but about building a true monopoly completely under his control, one capable of opening the doors of noble mansions for him without raising any suspicion. Then Lug explained that the main ingredient required for that moisturizer could only be produced within the Tuatha region itself. When Lord Baylor heard that, he did not object at all. Instead, he gave Lug complete freedom to carry out his plan however he wished. On the way back, Lug explained to Tart that he had deliberately chosen a rare material that only existed within his family's lands in Tuatha Dé, so that Lord Baylor would never be able to replace him easily. In that way, he secured two things at once: complete control over the market, and a constant flow of profits toward the Tuatha Dé region as the exclusive supplier of that ingredient. After several months, and under the name Ilig Balor, the moisturizer transformed into a massive phenomenon throughout the city. Lines of noblewomen stretched daily in front of the store, while purchases were limited to only 2 bottles per customer because of the restricted production capacity. During that period, Lug appointed Maha as the manager of the store, while also hiring all the girls who had once lived with her inside the orphanage. On the other side, Lug and Tart sat in a nearby location, observing how smoothly everything was progressing. His choice of Maha had been incredibly successful. The girls trusted one another. The work was running with excellent organization, and the appearance of the store was perfectly attractive, exactly as he had planned. As the success continued growing, competing companies began attempting to spy on them and steal the secret formula. However, even the employees themselves knew nothing about the secret ingredient coming from Tuatha Dé. Because of that, Lug ordered the security around the operation to be strengthened. One night, while preparing to sleep, he suddenly sensed the presence of an intruder moving inside the ceiling of his room. He immediately realized that it was a high-level spy because the intruder had managed to completely conceal his presence until getting extremely close to him. But before the man could move, Tart burst through the door and thrust her spear directly into the ceiling with astonishing precision. She had coated the tip of the spear with a paralyzing drug capable of immobilizing the target instantly. At the same time, Maha was monitoring the situation from above, before confirming that the spy had been fully captured. Afterward, he was dragged down into the underground chambers for interrogation in order to uncover the organization that had sent him, and thus, Lu's personal security network began proving its true effectiveness. On the following day, Lu prepared to travel to the neighboring kingdom where Dia lived. He had promised her monthly meetings during the absence of their teacher. He arrived directly through her window, where she welcomed him with great excitement before handing him several sheets filled with new spells she had personally developed. One of those spells deeply shocked him. It possessed the ability to reverse the gravity of any object she chose. That innovation opened enormous possibilities before him, whether in combat or strategic planning. After a short conversation, he handed her a small box he had personally created. It was chocolate, an invention that did not even exist in that world. At first, she found its appearance strange, but the instant she tasted it, she immediately fell in love with it and forced him to promise that he would bring her more during the following month. Between trade, building influence, and developing magic, Lug was no longer merely a professional assassin. He had gradually begun transforming into a major player, reshaping the balance of power within that world itself. After promising Dia that he would bring her more chocolate, he spent additional time with her reading, discussing magical theories, and training together. As the sun began to set, he said goodbye to her, before flying back toward Tarte and Maha. Several days later, Lug was sitting inside an open courtyard drinking tea while admiring how his cosmetics store had transformed into one of the most successful brands in the city. At that moment, Tart returned from one of her missions and handed him her trophies. The buttons taken from the clothes of the men she had defeated during battle as proof of her success. Lu informed her that he had heard rumors about her abilities on the battlefield, and that the soldiers had even given her a special nickname, which caused her some embarrassment. Lu continuously sent her out in order to gain field experience while keeping Maha beside him to learn money management and information gathering through the store. Thanks to the overwhelming success of the brand, Lu began receiving invitations to noble banquets and private gatherings, granting him a wide network of connections inside aristocratic society. One night, he held a meeting with Maha and informed her that he would leave her responsible for the store during his absence. Maha promised him that she would work toward expanding the brand into neighboring cities before showing him a map marking the location of a new store she wished to purchase. The moment Lug looked at the map, he realized that the store had originally belonged to Maha's father. Her father had once been a major merchant, but he died alongside his wife after his assistant seized complete control of the company. At that time, Maha fled in fear for her life, eventually ending up inside the orphanage. At that moment, Lug understood that she wanted to reclaim everything stolen from her family. However, he did not pressure her or ask for more details. Instead, he simply told her that he trusted her completely. Those words filled Maha with happiness, causing her to promise that she would deliver the best performance possible. At that moment, her friends entered the room and presented him with a bag containing rare herbal tea as a token of gratitude for saving them. Lug thanked them for the gift, then promised that he would never forget them. The following morning, while Maha was helping him prepare, she discovered the true silver color of his hair, and surprise immediately appeared on her face. During that time, Tart was preparing to travel together with him. After saying goodbye to Maha, the two of them departed by carriage toward their next destination. Along the way, they were surrounded by a group of wolf-type monsters. However, Lug had already sensed their presence beforehand through mana detection, so he immediately ordered the driver to hide. At that moment, Tart requested permission to handle the situation herself. Within only a few moments, she succeeded in completely eliminating the monsters. Lug praised her performance, but deep inside he thought that monsters appearing so close to human settlements might be a sign that the Demon King's emergence was approaching. Afterward, they arrived at the farmers' lands within the Tuatha De region. The people welcomed them with tremendous happiness, and thanked Lug for his continuous support before gifting him a basket filled with fresh vegetables. When he returned home, his mother greeted him with a strong hug that left him slightly embarrassed. After asking about his father, she told him to meet him inside the office. Inside, he found his father busy writing several documents. He raised his gaze toward him before praising him for becoming a true man, and informing him that he was proud of the success of the brand he had built with Lord Baylor's assistance. Afterward, he revealed that Baylor had visited him several days earlier, and that he had asked him to reconsider Lu's future, because he wanted him to abandon the path of assassination entirely and devote himself fully to trade. However, his father explained that he would never force him into any decision no matter what. At that moment, Lu firmly answered that he had not gone to Miltu in order to become a merchant, but to become a better assassin. But the surprising part was that his father appeared sympathetic toward Lord Baylor's opinion and attempted to advise him to live a peaceful life under a false identity, especially because until now, he still had not faced a true enemy outside the limits of training. At that moment, the conversation transformed into a genuine conflict inside Lu's heart. Would he continue walking toward his destiny as an assassin sent to that world for a greater purpose? Or would he choose a life of influence and wealth far away from bloodshed? This time, the conflict was not happening inside a battlefield, but within himself. But Lu firmly insisted before his father that he would remain an assassin of the Tuatha Dé family. He explained that preserving the stability of the kingdom would also affect neighboring kingdoms such as Miltu, where people he cared about and wanted to protect were living. Then he admitted something else. He had fallen in love with Dia and wished to marry her in the future, but because she belonged to a noble family, he would never be able to do so if he became nothing more than a merchant. Because of that, he needed to remain a noble, even if he became a noble assassin. At that moment, his father burst into laughter and told him that he would then become an aristocratic assassin. Afterward, he assigned him his first truly dangerous mission entirely under his own command. The target was Count Viacone, a noble who smuggled drugs into the kingdom in exchange for selling military secrets, causing the army to weaken and suffering to spread among the people. And for the very first time, Lu would lead the operation entirely on his own, without any direct supervision from his father. That night, he informed Tart about the details of the mission before beginning to write coded letters and tie them to messenger pigeons so they could reach Maha and allow her to begin gathering information about the Count, his mansion, and his guards. The following morning, his mother woke him up for an embarrassing reason, but he managed to escape the situation quickly. Later, she began showing him pictures of noble girls while demanding that he choose a wife and give her grandchildren. Lu completely rejected the idea, and when his mother shyly hinted toward Tart herself immediately refused as soon as she realized the embarrassment caused by the situation. As for Lug, he ended the conversation entirely. That night, he and Tart departed toward Count Pizar's city. After a long journey, they arrived the following morning. There, Lug informed her that the city was considered the second greatest commercial city after Miltu. But the reality was completely different. Wounded soldiers were begging in the streets, economic chaos had spread everywhere, and the weakness of the army was painfully obvious. And all of that was the direct result of the Count's betrayal and his sale of military secrets in exchange for drugs. While walking through one of the dark alleys, a small girl approached them and attempted to sell them gooseberry jam. But Lu immediately became suspicious. Tart pretended to taste it while Lu sampled a tiny amount, instantly discovering that it contained a narcotic substance. He grabbed the girl and confronted her with the truth, before smashing the jars onto the ground. At that moment, the girl collapsed into tears, and it became clear that she was merely a tool being forced to sell drugs for the Count's network. In that instant, Lu realized that the roots of the corruption ran far deeper than he had expected. The drugs were not being sold only to nobles, they were poisoning the entire city itself. Because of that, he decided that the mission would not merely be a quick assassination operation, but the destruction of an entire network of corruption. His eyes became as cold as ice. This was no longer an ordinary mission, but a message. And the moment the jars shattered across the ground, 4 men suddenly appeared directly before them. But Tart and Lu immediately engaged them in a swift confrontation and managed to subdue them within only a few moments. After that, Lu and Tart decided to ask the girl why she was selling that jam, so she took them to her house. The moment she opened the door, she pointed toward her mother sitting in the corner of the room, barely conscious because of the effects of the drugs, and the instant the mother saw her daughter, she rushed toward her while desperately demanding more drugs, but the girl told her that she could not bring any. At that moment, the mother lost control and violently shoved her daughter until she fell onto the ground. When Lu witnessed that scene, he grabbed the mother and restrained her in place before using his ability to remove the drug's influence from her body, causing her to lose consciousness immediately afterward. The girl ran toward her mother to make sure she was all right. As for Lug, he informed Tart that he had removed the physical dependency from the woman's body, but psychological dependency was an entirely different matter. Afterward, they left the place and returned once again. When they arrived at the house, Lug's mother welcomed them once more, and she had just received several cosmetic products sent from her son's company. At the same time, there was a letter Maha had sent to Lug together with the cosmetics. Inside it, she explained that Count Viaconi was the true person responsible for spreading those drugs, while also describing in detail the effects of the substance on the human body. However, she also informed him that punishing him would not be easy, because powerful nobles were supporting him from behind the scenes. When Lug read all of that, he became even more determined to make the Count pay for his crimes, especially after Maha also explained the method that would allow them to enter his mansion easily. On the following day, Lug met with Maha, and together they boarded a carriage heading toward Viacon's residence. During the journey, Maha told him that she had missed him despite his absence lasting only 10 days. She added that all the girls wanted to grow closer to him, but he deliberately continued ignoring them. He calmly answered that he viewed them as family and nothing more because Dia was the only person he loved. Eventually, they arrived at Count Viacon's mansion. There, his wife Brigid warmly welcomed them, and it was obvious how happy she was to see them. She guided them inside before beginning to test the new product. She admired it greatly, but asked why they had chosen her to become the first person to try it. Lug answered that her husband possessed influence and status greater than most nobles, which made her the perfect person to test the product because many ladies viewed her as someone worth imitating. After hearing that, she happily informed them that she was proud of her husband's business success, especially because only a few years earlier, they had been nothing more than poor nobles incapable of living such a luxurious life. At that moment, Viacone himself entered the room, and his remaining days had already become few. He warmly welcomed them while Lu formally introduced himself as a noble. Then Viacone informed them that he supported his wife's passion for cosmetics before inviting them to a party that would be held inside the mansion later that night. They thanked him for the invitation. And afterward, Viacone approached his wife Brigid and kissed her in front of everyone. Lug silently watched the scene while the anger inside him continued growing stronger. That night, the party began. The aristocratic ladies were extremely excited by Lug's presence and began asking him to let them test the new product and purchase more cosmetics. At that moment, Brigid arrived carrying the product, causing the women to immediately rush toward her. Afterward, Viacone approached Lu and handed him a glass of wine, before telling him that he appreciated anything capable of making his wife happy. He even jokingly commented that he hoped there was no secret relationship between him and Brigid. But Lu completely rejected those words and firmly stated that he would never do such a thing. During their conversation, he attempted to open the topic of Viacone's business operations, explaining that he had heard rumors about the tremendous success of his trade. However, Viacone attempted to hide his filthy truth by claiming that it was merely a small business unworthy of the Baylor Trading Company's attention. Those words only caused Lu's anger to grow even stronger. As time passed, the party finally ended and everyone returned to their homes. As for Lug, he returned together with Tart to the edge of a high mountain overlooking Viacone's mansion directly below. Using his special assassin sight, the entire mansion became perfectly clear before him. Brigid had previously informed them that her husband stepped onto the balcony every night to drink a glass of wine and gaze at the moon before sleeping. There, Lug sat at the edge of the cliff and summoned a sniper rifle while Tart stood guard beside him. After a short while, Viacone finally appeared on the balcony exactly as they had expected. At that moment, Lug was completely determined to end everything without hesitation. He aimed his rifle toward him, then fired. A single shot was enough to end his life. Once it was over, he immediately concealed the weapon and informed Tart that they needed to leave. But he suddenly stopped when he saw Brigid stepping onto the balcony before beginning to scream the moment she saw her husband's corpse lying on the ground. Despite all of Viacone's crimes, the love between him and his wife had been obvious. Because of that, Lug felt a slight sadness because in the end he was still human. But he felt no regret whatsoever because he was completely convinced that the man deserved punishment. Afterward, he returned home together with Tart while telling himself that he had become an assassin who personally decided who lived and who died without anyone forcing orders upon him anymore. Several months later, Lug and his companion returned from a deserted island where they had been training in magic. The moment they arrived at the shore, Maha was there waiting for them. Lug immediately asked her whether anything had happened during his absence, so she informed him that she had one piece of good news and another piece of bad news. While they were returning by carriage, she began with the good news. She said that she had managed to locate a sacred treasure, a magical spear that could never be destroyed. That spear belonged to a man named Satanta Magnus, who was highly suspected to be the hero because of his overwhelming strength. At that moment, Lug asked her whether she would be capable of stealing the spear or obtaining it somehow. She confidently assured him that she could do it. As for the bad news, it was the outbreak of a civil war within a neighboring kingdom called Soigel. She also informed him that Dia's kingdom was preparing to join the royal army to fight against the rebels, but there was an incredibly powerful soldier among the enemy ranks who was causing enormous problems. At that moment, worry began overtaking Lu, causing him to decide to visit Dia immediately. He entered her room through the window as usual, and she became extremely happy to see him. However, he immediately got straight to the point and asked her about the war. She informed him that the situation was not that dangerous yet because the war was still far away from her kingdom, and they also possessed powerful magic users. But Lug informed her that there was a terrifying soldier among the rebels, and that person might actually be the hero himself. And if that was truly the case, defeating him would become almost impossible for ordinary humans. Afterward, he suggested that she flee together with her family to a safe kingdom before the enemy arrived, but she completely rejected the idea, firmly insisting that she would never abandon her people during a time like this. After that, Dia completely changed the subject and decided to go out together with him since her father and his advisors were currently outside the kingdom. Even though Lug did not feel comfortable with the idea, he ultimately agreed. While wandering through the city together, they played a shooting game where Dia needed to hit the target in order to win a small teddy bear, and she successfully managed to do it. Afterward, she informed him that she was hungry, so he promised to take her somewhere special. While they were eating, Dia told him that she preferred the meals he personally cooked himself. Because of that, Lug promised her that he would cook for her every time she visited his kingdom. After leaving the restaurant, they found a small child crying quietly in an isolated corner. When they asked him what had happened, they discovered that he had become separated from his mother. Since neither of them could ignore the situation, they helped him until they managed to reunite him with her. Because of Lug's kind behavior, Dia decided to reward him by taking him to the city's private hot spring baths. There, Lug asked her whether the baths were separated between men and women, but she informed him that they were not, then laughed before explaining that she had reserved the entire place exclusively for the two of them. Afterward, she began changing her clothes while Lug did the same, despite his mind being filled with thoughts. The two of them then entered the bathing area together and were both amazed by the enormous size and beauty of the place. They continued joking and playing around in the water for some time, but suddenly, Dia slipped toward the deeper part of the bath. However, Lug managed to reach her and save her at the perfect moment. He even began teaching her how to swim and keep her body floating above the water. Afterward, the two of them held each other's hands inside the water while Dia spoke about her deep love for her kingdom and her wish for her father to return safely from the war. When Lug realized that she would never abandon her people, no matter what happened, he decided to respect her decision and promised that he would help her in his own way. At the end of the day, the two of them said goodbye to one another. Lug promised her that he would come to see her again, but she informed him that she would be busy during the coming period, and once she became free, she would send him a letter. He agreed to that before returning home. At the same time, Dia received a fake peace agreement from men who appeared to be ordinary civilians, but in reality, they were disguised soldiers, and that was clear proof that she had decided to participate in the war personally. When Lug returned to Alvin, he found his father and mother standing beside a heavily injured man lying on the ground. He immediately asked them what had happened. His father informed him that a new mission had arrived, and that Lug himself would be the one carrying it out. At that moment, Lug asked about the target, but his father's answer struck him like lightning. The target was Dia. Lug froze in place from overwhelming shock and confusion. However, his father calmly informed him that he could refuse the mission if he wished. At that moment, Lug asked whether interfering in the affairs of another kingdom during wartime was not considered wrong. His father agreed with that way of thinking and explained that exposing an assassination operation during a conflict between kingdoms could lead to an enormous international crisis. Then he revealed that the request had been made for personal reasons. The enemy had managed to defeat the kingdom of Yakunara after it had supported the royal army during the civil war inside Swiggle, and now the enemy's complete focus had shifted toward Dia, because they knew that she possessed overwhelming magical power and wanted to seize control of her for themselves. He also explained that the kingdom of Yakunara was known far more for its strength in magic and trade than for military power. The enemy forces had managed to invade the kingdom with ease, and they were planning to completely destroy the city in order to prevent the Count's daughter from falling into the hands of any other faction. Because of that, Count Kian decided to choose the most difficult solution possible in order to reduce the bloodshed. And the surprising part was that Dia herself agreed to that decision. At that moment, Lug's father informed his son that the only way to save Dia was to fake news of her death and secretly smuggle her out of the kingdom, and that this request had come directly from her father himself. In that instant, Lug fully understood the true nature of the mission and agreed to carry it out and save Dia because he had once promised her that he would come running to save her the moment she ever needed him. During the conversation, his father suddenly shocked him with a strange truth. Dia was actually his mother's cousin's daughter, meaning she was related to him. But because both of them possessed the same silver hair, Lug did not care about that fact at all, since all of his focus was directed towards saving the girl he loved. Afterward, he began preparing to depart, but Tart came to him and informed him that she wanted to go together with him. At first, Lug rejected the idea, explaining that the journey was extremely long and that he needed to move at maximum speed. However, Tart informed him that she fully understood she could never match his speed, but she was still capable of helping him by sharing her power with him during the journey. When he asked her how she intended to do that, she explained that she would use the wind spell he had taught her. Suddenly, she activated the spell and formed a barrier around both of them, before the two of them launched forward at the highest speed possible. The effect of her assistance was truly enormous because her own energy began being consumed by the resistance of the wind instead of Lug's energy, while she also pulled him forward through negative pressure that increased his speed even further. But that rapidly exhausted her strength in a terrifying way. Night fell, and heavy rain began pouring down, yet neither of them stopped running. During the journey, Lug noticed that Tart had already reached her absolute limit, but she refused to listen to him and stubbornly continued running, completely determined to help him until the very end. The following morning, while they were still running, her magical barrier gradually began cracking apart until it shattered completely. The spell exploded, and Tart was violently thrown away by the recoil, but Lug instantly rushed forward and caught her in midair before she could fall. At that moment, she burst into tears while apologizing because she could no longer continue any further. But Lug calmly thanked her and told her that she had already saved enough of his energy for him to complete the journey. Then he left her behind to rest while continuing the trip alone. After many long hours, Lug finally arrived near the kingdom during the night before climbing a high hill and hiding there. Afterward, he used his assassin's sight in order to observe the situation. He discovered that the enemy had completely surrounded the city and numbered around 1,500 soldiers, while the remaining forces of Yakunara had fewer than 200 fighters left. He also noticed the presence of magic users among the enemy ranks, which granted them a clear advantage in the battle. The moment he fully understood the situation, he decided to directly strike their weakest point. He approached the battlefield before beginning to eliminate the magic users one after another. However, the enemy quickly noticed his presence and began showering his position with volleys of arrows. Because of that, Lug was forced to use mana-charged explosive arrows in order to scatter them. During the battle, he spotted Dia inside one of the castle rooms. At the same time, Count Xian's army noticed the confusion spreading throughout the enemy lines, so they seized the opportunity and launched a counterattack. As for Lug, he began carrying out his plan. He used magic to determine a safe route leading directly to Dia without anyone noticing him, while also carrying the corpse of a dead soldier to later use in faking her death. After some time, he finally managed to enter the room where Dia was located, and there he found her father as well. The moment she saw him, she immediately ran toward him with obvious happiness. As for Count Kian, he formally introduced himself before joking that his daughter would be taken away from him in 2 different ways after clearly realizing how deeply the two of them loved one another. Afterward, Lug explained the entire plan and made Dia memorize the exact words she needed to say before the soldiers once the operation began. Then he set the room on fire so the situation would appear as though she had died in the flames. In the end, he opened the window so Dia could say the agreed words before the soldiers. But at that moment, Lug suddenly felt horrifying anxiety, as though an enormous danger was approaching them. Suddenly, a massive mana-infused weapon was aimed directly toward them. The instant he saw it, he immediately pulled Dia away from the attack's trajectory. In the next moment, a tremendous explosion occurred, causing a large portion of the room to collapse. Fortunately, all of them survived without suffering serious injuries. When they looked outside afterward, they saw a gigantic knight standing in the center of the battlefield, and he was responsible for that attack. Lug's anger immediately ignited, causing him to summon his grenade cannon and fire it toward the knight. A massive explosion erupted and flames spread everywhere, but the shocking surprise was that the knight emerged from the explosion still standing, having suffered only minor injuries. Lug froze in shock before using his assassin's sight, where he noticed that the knight's physical and magical strength increased the angrier he became. The moment he realized that, he informed Dia and her father that no ordinary attack would have any effect on him. Count Kian instantly understood the situation and ordered them to flee immediately, because faking Dia's death had now become impossible after the appearance of that monster, especially since that same knight had previously ended the civil war through absolute overwhelming power. Suddenly, the knight shouted from the center of the battlefield, demanding that the person who attacked him come out for a direct duel between knights. He explained that he had been impressed by the power of the attack, but threatened that if his opponent refused to appear, he would kill everyone present. However, if he won the duel, he would withdraw his forces and never approach Count Kian again. After introducing himself as Satanta Magnus, Lug immediately remembered Maha's words about the magical spear and concluded that this man was most likely the true hero, and the sacred spear he carried completely confirmed his suspicions. Afterward, Satanta warned Lug against attempting to escape the duel, placing him in an extremely dangerous situation. And because Lug fully understood the truth, he knew that he would lose if the battle became a direct confrontation. At that moment, Lu summoned a massive missile and launched it toward the sky. His strange calmness caused Dia to become frightened, so she tried to stop him while telling him not to sacrifice his life. But he looked at her steadily and said that he was an assassin, and what he was about to do was not an honorable duel, but an assassination operation. Afterward, Lug and Dia's father headed directly to meet Satanta. First, Lug told him to make sure he would honor his word if he lost. Satanta confidently agreed because he was convinced that Lug had absolutely no chance of defeating him. But Lug answered with even greater confidence, firmly declaring that he would be the victor. At the same time, he was calmly counting the seconds until the missile he had launched into the sky returned. Then he asked Dia's father to step back slightly in order to buy more time. Afterward, he continued speaking with Satanta before pulling out a coin and declaring that the battle would begin the moment it touched the ground. What Satanta did not realize was that Lug was merely stalling for time, and the instant the coin fell, the missile launched towards space returned at terrifying speed before crashing directly into Satanta. In the very next moment, an unimaginably massive explosion erupted. Lug had learned the concept behind that destructive weapon from his previous life on Earth, and he understood perfectly well that it was capable of annihilating an enormous area entirely. Because of that, he considered it the perfect weapon for eliminating a knight possessing such terrifying power. The explosion reached such a horrifying level that Dia and her father were forced to use a magical barrier in order to protect themselves. Even Lug himself was violently thrown away by the shockwave before losing consciousness. As for Dia, who survived without serious injuries, she immediately ran toward him while crying and screaming desperately in an attempt to wake him up. After several moments, he finally regained consciousness. At that moment, Dia tightly embraced him while telling him that she had been terrified of losing him. Afterward, Lug returned to the kingdom of Alvan, together with Dia. Tart and their parents welcomed them warmly, allowing peace to finally return once again. Several months passed while Dia lived together with them. During that period, Lug's father announced that he intended to officially adopt her, which would legally make her Lug's sister, despite her being 3 years older than him. However, he explained that it was not truly a problem, because her appearance seemed younger due to the nature of their bloodline itself, and she would also carry a different family name. Lug immediately agreed to the plan, while his mother and Tart agreed as well. But the true surprise came when his father informed them that the hero had already arrived in their kingdom. Lug froze in shock the moment he heard those words, because he realized at that instant that Satanta had not been the true hero as he had previously believed. His father warned him not to underestimate the situation because the hero's arrival meant that the appearance of the Demon King had become extremely close. Lug immediately agreed without the slightest hesitation. After a short while, a luxurious carriage arrived before the Alvin mansion. From it stepped out a young man with an elegant appearance and overwhelming confidence. Then he was formally introduced as Lord Epona, the true hero. And here the story comes to an end, my dear viewers. We truly hope you enjoyed it and had fun watching. Before you close the video, do not forget to leave a like to support us. Subscribe to the channel for more upcoming episodes and activate the notification bell so you can watch all the newest anime releases as soon as they arrive. Share your thoughts with us in the comments, and we will meet again in future episodes. Until next time.